as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the agenda very quickly. I think in the interest of brevity, I'm going to defer approval of the minutes just so we don't have to break and we can get started. And also to facilitate things for Public Works usually is last on the agenda at my doing when their presentation is a little bit faster. So I'm going to flip those so we can hear about the good work that's going on with the joint infrastructure program. So with that, we've had the roll call item number 1, 2, approval of the minutes from the September 9, 2020 meeting deferred. Item number 3, Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans, Executive Director Gassan Corbin, presentation and discussion of Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans quarterly and annual report pursuant to Louisiana Revised Statute 334091. Item number 4, Department of Public Works Director Keith LaGrange, presentation, discussion of the current status and scope of the Joint Infrastructure Recovery Response JIRR program citywide. And number 5, adjournment. So with that, I would like to start with number 4 first. Let's kick off some good news, and also I know it's a good presentation. I don't think it's going to take very long. So with that, Keith and Ramsey, thank you very much for being here today. You all have the floor. And Paul, will you please pull up the presentation? Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to start, Councilman Giarrusso, and then turn it over to Keith in a moment. I just want to make sure I have a kid at home, and I'm by myself with her. So can you hear me okay? I'm taking advantage of the Zoom meeting while I've got a kid with a little fever. So
we can hear you fine, and welcome the cuteness they bring to this meeting.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Paul. If you can go to the next slide, Paul. I really want to hit this. I'm not going to get into the details of what you're seeing there, but we look at COVID starting on March 9th of this year. That was our first positive case, and that was very much an all hands on deck, focused on this public health emergency. And one of the big conscious decisions we made was to ensure that this program moved forward, because we thought at the time there wasn't a lot of expertise in pandemic construction management, but this is too crucial to our city. It's too crucial to our safety of our residents, and it's hugely impactful to our economy. And so our construction program has continued. The Joint Infrastructure Program has issued somewhere in the range of more than $300 million in total infrastructure between subsurface, surface, and vertical. That's, JRR is part of that. And that work keeps going. And I just want to tell you, Councilman Giarrusso and council members, thank you for having us. I know we've tried this a couple times, and I appreciate Councilman Giarrusso, you putting us up front, because I was going to make fun of you at the next groundbreaking, because I didn't think you'd ever let us do this. But I really appreciate the time. But if I can, I just want to thank Keith LaGrange. He's been on the job for a year and some change. He's going to run this show, but we have an incredible team. We've empowered that team, and those folks are doing great work. You're going to hear from Randy Jones, who's in a recent addition to DPW, but was at Sewage and Water Board and moved over to focus on joint infrastructure. Evan Quintero did the same thing. John DeFreitas is in our project controls unit with Katie Rodriguez. And those folks, my first, month on I want to say my first week in the job, I went and found the project controls people, because those people are in charge of schedule and money. And we had to see where is this? And the program was not where you would want it to be in any way. And this team has made this program move so aggressively forward. Khalid Salih, Mark Van Holla from Sewage and Water Board. Khalid used to be there. Jim Anacone from Sewage and Water Board. And then our 2 deputy directors of DPW, Marcello Barbero and Josh Hartley, and all those folks have made this thing work. Bob Turner from Sewage and Water Board is one of the best folks I've ever worked with, and he is very deep into this as well. And I just appreciate the time, and I'm going to be here for any questions that any of you all have, but I'm going to turn it over to Keith now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramsey. And I just want to echo, our group's been doing fantastic work. And, And we do have the new addition, Randy. I really thank her for taking on the task of being our program administrator for all capital projects, but she had a long history, her and Evan, with the program from conception. So they've been in the FEMA program since it started, and I really think it was a great addition to the city, and I want to thank her for coming on. Next slide. So what you see here is some program highlights. So the top portion, since May of 2018, we've gotten over 32 projects totaling $271 million into construction. We have 16 projects have been completed since May of 2018, totaling 80 million. 27 projects have gone into final design, totaling 292 million. Now, this next snapshot is huge because I want to show how fast we've progressed over the last 6 to 8 months. And JIR spending accelerated approximately 8% since this summer. We've got over 62 projects currently in construction. We're at 375 million. This is bond and FEMA, and the bond work, some of the bond work has FEMA work wrapped up into it. So I don't want to leave that it's just JIRR. This is all projects from Public Works. We got over 20 projects currently in bid and award worth 200 million. And final design, we got 30 projects we're hoping to get out to bid before the end of the year worth 295 million. So just going through the numbers, we're going to have approximately 80. Some of the 62 projects are going to fall off by the end of the year, but coming early quarter one, late quarter one, early quarter two of next year, we're going to have over 60 projects potentially in construction at one time. And I like to always say this work is not painless, it's painful. And we want to really thank the residents for being patient. Thank our neighborhood engagement group, Sarah Porteous and all of her people, as well as the mayor's office as well, because it takes a lot of troops to keep the public informed, and they really have a big task at hand. And I thank you for everything. Yes, ma'am.
Keith, real quick, let me just interrupt you because you're bringing up a really good point, and I had to be educated on this for sure. You and I had conversations about some specific streets, and people are saying like, why hasn't this particular street whatever been fixed? I thought it was in the pipeline with this money. And you really had to, put the process out there for me to understand. And then I could relay it to the different neighbors so that they could understand just, that you have to follow these federal guidelines as to how the money is going to be spent. And could you just briefly walk us through what some of those steps look like, just so that people understand that this isn't just Keith deciding, I don't want to do the street right now, I'm going to do it later, that there's actually a very lengthy process that has to take place.
So if you don't mind, that's actually the slide I have Randy. I'm gonna let Randy, the public, see Randy for the first time. And that was her slide to go over. So if you don't mind, it's right at the end of the presentation. Perfect. But only have about 2 more, and the rest is just kind of pictures and fluff, so we can run through that.
Thanks, Keith.
No
Keith,
problem.
Can I add one thing here, Keith?
Yeah.
And these numbers, Councilman Moreno, I appreciate you asking that. We're going to get to the technical side of it. I would be remiss if I don't point out this is an astronomical amount of work going out the door, particularly in a pandemic. And I cannot thank the procurement team enough from city government, who within several days transitioned to online procurement. The only way that we can do what we do is we're able to properly procure it and pay the folks who do it. And the PDU, led by Joe Threat, Lenitra Hassan, Kim DeLarge, those folks, and it was more confusing when I was at the schools because it was a different model, but we're taking federal money using state agency, GOSEP, as the flow through, coming to the city to administer a program for 2 agencies, city government and sewage and water board. It's incredibly complex, which is why I think it sat for so long. And Helene, I appreciate your question, but these numbers are staggering despite how difficult that is. And I just think it's really important that we acknowledge the many people outside of DPW who are on this. Thank you, Keith.
Okay, and if y'all, if you want to go to the next slide. So here's just a list of the projects that compose of the 80 million. You can go through the next two slides. This shows work under construction, how it composes the 375 million total. And then the next two, you can go through those. These show projects currently in bid and award. Next slide, totaling the 200 million. Next slide. This is our third quarter forecast. I'm sorry, we wanted to have it updated. We got crunched with time, but we're on track to hit for the third quarter forecast. Go to the next slide. Totaling 170 to 175 million. We're on track right now to hit 135 million. Totaling these projects, but as you can see, we've wrapped up. We've got a lot of bond projects on this last slide. I wanted to point to. We got a lot of bond projects that include some FEMA work inside of them, but you can see these costs are a little bit lower. So we've been hearing from our contracting community putting out smaller projects. This is a great example of how we've got some of those smaller projects out into the public. Next slide. So here's the Q2, Q3, and Q4 forecast for advertising. We're hoping to begin construction of 56 projects worth 366 million before the end of the year. And we're trying to advertise 81 projects worth 590 million before the end of the year. This is a heavy lift. This was a way for us to show FEMA that we have the capacity and we can get the work done. We were supposed to have over 580 million this year of FEMA work alone out on the street. That we're going to be short, but we're going to be short somewhere around 440 million versus the 580. But this is how we showed FEMA how we're going to catch up. So, and we're doing this strategically to where we don't let projects. We're phasing projects to where we don't have two contractors in one neighborhood, and we have to do it methodically to where we make it as painless as possible for the public. Next slide. Here's just some the next few slides. If you just run through them slowly, here's some pictures of the work going on. This is Holly Grove in District A.
Keith?
I believe we picked a project in each district. Yes, sir.
Keith? Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just want to stop right before you got to the photos, which are great. But also, can you spend a minute talking about if somebody looks online and they see a JIRR project, and I'm just going to make this up, like the 3700, the 3800 block of Ramsey Green Street is being fixed, but 3900 doesn't appear on the map. And that one needs reconstruction or curbs. How are you all dealing with that? I just think that's a really positive point that needs to be explained a little bit publicly too.
Absolutely. And Joe, you've asked me this before. So we have that slide with Randy. Randy's going to go over how blocks are added and how do we change from original like patch mill overlay to full reconstruction, and how do we go about that process, and how does FEMA mandate us to go about that process? Randy will have that in her slide right after the photos.
Great, thank you.
So if you just want to run through some of the photos, I think we show a project per district just to keep everyone in there. This is Holly Grove in District A. There's Ferret in District B. Is the West Bank neighborhood, Group B, in District C.
Can I say something to Councilmember Druso?
Sure.
I just want to thank y'all since we have a little District C photograph there. I've been driving around the district quite frequently, checking on the road work, and what y'all are doing too in Bocage. I know I sent y'all a little thank you text. It really is remarkable, and I just do want to thank you. You know, some of these neighborhoods have not had any love, any kind of attention for 10, 20 years, if not more. And I just heard from a constituent yesterday on a Zoom call talking about how much she loves living in Algiers, and she moved to Bocage and she can walk down the sidewalk without falling now. So I just want to thank y'all. It really means a lot, and people are really noticing the work that you're doing and the pace that you're doing and the quality of the work. Because before, when they would try to patch in Bocage, the manhole covers, you know, there's this subsidence that's going on, and they would just patch around it, but it could still bottom out your car.
Mhm.
And I just want to thank y'all. It's really total reconstruction throughout that neighborhood, and it's really impressive to see. So thanks again.
No, thank you, council member. And I like the conversation to stay. I know we're focusing on the FEMA money because that's the big pot right now, but I like the conversation to stay, keep bonds included, which is what we're doing with Bocage. We're using bond money for that because honestly, that's the future of the program.
Kristen, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thanks. I really wanted to bring that up on the previous slide. That's what the importance of using the combination of bond money and the FEMA money, because like we said, like I've been saying, Algiers did not get any access to a lot of that money. And so I think this allows the flexibility for the administration to make sure that every district is getting some investment. And I think that's the power of the bond money. And, you know, that's why I've always supported y'all when it comes to bond money. And I'll keep supporting you because you're also proving that you're getting the work done, right? And I just want to thank y'all for that.
We appreciate it. We know that the public puts a big trust in us to get it done correctly. And I have faith that our group, if any group, our group will get it done and make sure that it's right when we leave. So here's Treme Lafitte in Group A in District D. And I believe we did not leave out Councilmember Nguyen. Next photo. It's Lake Vista in District D and Lower Ninth Ward, Group B in District E. And Reed East in District E.
I have a question. So
Sure.
in District E, you see the manhole covers. Well, what's happening in Algiers with some of these manhole covers raising? Is that a subsidence issue? What is causing that in some of these areas?
Sure. And typically over time, the loads on the road eventually make the road settle, and the road, just over time with subsidence, everything kind of gradually settles. But the bedding under the manholes is typically significantly better, just to hold the brick structure or the precast structure together. So the manholes will stay intact, the road settles, and as you said, you will see these manholes starting to raise. So if you'll see in the new construction, especially on concrete, it's really prevalent. We block out a portion of the road. So now when we want to repair a manhole, all we do is break out that little concrete piece, drop the manhole, re-pour it, and it doesn't affect 4 panels.
Okay, so you actually lower the manhole cover to be in the same. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Next photo. So I'm gonna get up. I'm gonna pass the computer over to Randy Jones, who's our program administrator for all capital projects for DPW.
Good morning. I heard we have plenty of questions on how we are trying to create a program where we are leaving neighborhoods more whole than was previously slated. And to be going to the beginning of the program, the way a lot of these streets were scoped was based upon the utilities underneath. So I understand that, there is questions on why this block versus the other block and how come it's not, how come it doesn't continue on, or if we have, the 2000 block and the 2200 block, why aren't we considering the 2100 block? Well, we are considering those, but it's according to funding sources, right? So what FEMA obligated was according to the infrastructure below the streets and the problems that were directly correlated to the storm. And so we are adding funding and we are adding different criteria to incorporate those other streets. And as we go through this program, there are different things to consider. As such, the water hammer program with Sewage and Water Board and the increased pressure as we discover more water leaks in our program, you'll see more upscoping with that as well for a complete street above. But in 2016, it was identified that 65% of the city streets were poor or failed condition. We are estimating that revitalization to be about $5 billion. This is the largest undertaking, arguably, the city's seen since the New Deal. And so, you know, trying to organize that reconstruction is a huge task. We can't shut down the city at one time and do it. We can't do it funding wise, right? And we can't do it with the equipment out on the street, and then people wouldn't be able to pass. So it's a balancing act, and I appreciate everybody's questions and considerations as we move forward, and we try to articulate that to the public, because it really is, it's a huge effort on everybody's behalf. So I'd like to go through how Public Works is evaluating blocks to be incorporated into our program and considered for the joint infrastructure. So when pavement or drainage has been identified as failed or poor condition, it will score on this criteria to be considered, with any new waterline point repairs that qualify it for full reconstruct. And so that's where the water hammer project from Sewage and Water Board and that increased pressure comes in place. Blocks are within the project as identified in the contract. So we're already within the scope identified by FEMA and our GOSAP partners. And then funding exists in a contract for additional scope of work and is bid under the budget. So when we have a project that, you know, we're coming in under bid and we have room to add and flexibility there, that will be considered. If a block is not yet assigned or within the footprint of a future project of DPW or Sewage and Water Board scheduled within the next 5 years. So what we don't want to happen is pull scope that's already slated for future projects and has future needs, because then we're just going to be repeating a process and we're going to create, you know, the pile-up effect if we take somebody out of the sequence and place them in front of all other projects. And then blocks can also be considered for small patch and overlay projects from old waterline, sewer, and drainage point repairs. And so what we're really trying to do is we're trying to incorporate these blocks when we can with the joint infrastructure. If we can't within the joint infrastructure, then we're considering bond projects. And then if they don't fall into the joint infrastructure and they don't fall into the bond projects, then we're considering them for maintenance. So we're really looking for holistic approach to these neighborhoods without failing to consider the future work or needs of the block, so that we're only tackling it once. Next slide.
Hang on, I'm sorry, Randy, can I stop you for a second? I want you to I want to make sure that the public also understands just on how the bid process works, that it is that you've got all these 30 days to do certain things. Like you got to do 30 days for drawings and 30 days for advertising. And so if you could kind of explain that process too, so that people understand that just because, yes, we're going to go work on this particular street, it doesn't mean that tomorrow we can get the crew out there, and just explain some of those federal guidelines that you have to follow.
Oh, absolutely. So for everybody who's wondering, yes, design takes a good year sometimes, and depending on what kind of infrastructure needs to be addressed underneath the street. So if we're talking water line, sewer line, manhole adjustments, drainage, especially if we're trying to improve drainage, right? And where that drain is flowing, what pump stations and what canals, like all of these things are taken into consideration, green infrastructure, and different opportunities there. So design can.
And on the design thing, what I didn't know, and I think that this is also important to note, is that this isn't like we're taking too long to do the design. There are certain timeframes that are put in place by these federal guidelines that need to be followed. So that's like that timeline is there. I mean, the reason why I keep bringing this up is because, you know, I constantly get calls like, hey, why is this street XYZ not finished when it's, you know, supposed to be on this, you know, JIRR list. And then as soon as I give them the timeline and they see where it is in the process, they're like, oh, well, then that makes sense. That's why. But they don't, but the work is continuing behind the scenes, but it's just all of these different timelines set by the feds that we're needing to follow.
Absolutely. And so you bring up a lot of good points, and maybe next time I'll have a better outline of all of the regulations and guidelines that we need to follow and what can hold up. We've actually done a lot of things to shorten that time frame. So we're actually moving faster than in precedented cases, right? So for instance, the city hired a city archaeologist and a city historic preservationist because each one of these projects has to go through a FEMA review that includes a SHPO review and a tribal review and Department of Archaeology, and I'm sure I'm leaving someone out, but they go through the whole entire gambit to make sure all stakeholders have a say and Section 106 process is accounted for. And then we have to incorporate sometimes those comments and conditions in our plan. And so that usually happens between 65% and 95%, right? We want our design to be whole, but still sometimes they add conditions that may alter that design. And what that might look like is your character defining features for your historic neighborhoods. And let's face it, we're in New Orleans, so that must be all of the city, right? And it usually is. Some areas are more complex than others. Right now, we're looking at Central City with Magnolia Street with the cobblestone paving. And so that is a character defining feature that SHPO and the state would like to see preserved. And so we have to take those things into consideration, as well as figuring out if it's technically feasible from our engineering standpoint to move forward and creating your whole living space and not just the functionality of the streets. We're considering our built heritage as well. And so yes, all of those things are taken into consideration, and that's been drastically reduced. So when we talk about the abbreviated consultation process, our in-house historic preservationist is going through a whole historical context for the entire city and basically writing a book on these character defining features and how this program has affected them. And typically that review would have taken 180 days. And I think we've shortened that to 30 to 60 days on our FEMA review. And really most of those comments are coming from our public assistants rather than our EHP, which is our environmental and historic preservationists. So there are a lot of considerations. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of stakeholders and reviews, and I'd be more than happy to outline that time frame. But anytime we have to go out and create a drawing for a block, so if we're upscoping and adding a block that didn't previously exist, and we're adding drainage or a water line or a sewer line, anything that requires a drawing or an engineer to be on that block for, that has to go through their separate FEMA review if it wasn't in the first one. So you're going to tack on another 30 to 60 days for that review, even if they're doing construction in the adjacent block, before we can go ahead and break ground on that block. We have to have approval from FEMA to go ahead and go.
Thanks, Randy. I think as we wrap this up, what may make sense is sort of a combination of what I'm hearing from all of the council members, which is a future presentation that shows what the timelines look like and what FEMA is asking for, and then how scope is added, whether, Randy, as you just said, it's up scope through FEMA or through the bond money, as Ramsey and Councilmember Palmer talked about, and then actually showing on a map in the different districts where that has occurred. I think so people can not only get a sense of what the timelines look like, how some of those time barriers have been restricted or worked through to make them facilitate even faster. And so people can just see on paper or on a map, this is where additional work has been added. This is where green infrastructure has been implemented instead. This is where the initial plan said A, but we pivoted to B, I think would be helpful for everybody. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much. Is there any closing comments? Yeah, Councilmember Palmer.
I got one quick question, since we're talking about some of the historic neighborhoods. The old ballast, you know, and the slate curbs,
Mhm.
when those are pulled up, where are y'all putting those? Are you keeping them?
2 yards.
So we keep them out at our maintenance yard, and the directive there is to preserve and replace when technically feasible.
Okay, so they're not being thrown away.
They should not be.
The answer is
No, the answer is no.
Understand how valuable they are, right? And that y'all should either reuse them where appropriate or sell them for a lot of money, because they are valuable, and they are, when you talk about the historic fabric of the city, you know, that makes up a great part of it.
No, we absolutely would not throw them away. I think, you know.
You have contractors coming.
I have heard
There'd be hell to pay, Kristen. There'd be hell to pay.
what?
I was just saying there'd be hell to pay if we threw those things away.
There would be. Okay, just checking. Thanks,
Yeah.
y'all.
Councilman Giruso, I know you want to wrap it up. Can I add one thing before we close on this agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. And Randy did a good job sort of summarizing that. I love this slide, and if I can, Randy, I'm going to steal a little of your thunder here. Councilwoman Moreno, I'm going to say a couple things that you may remember from our last 2 years of doing these in front of you. You remember joint infrastructure was obligated, approved by FEMA in July of 2016. And when we all came in, it was like less than 1% of the money had been spent. What that 2016 1 point some odd billion dollars was predicated on was and Randy, disagree with me if I got this wrong, was a 2015 Stantec report where they used vans driving around assessing the conditions of the city's surface and subsurface infrastructure. When Keith's team goes and tries to build these 300 joint infrastructure projects and round them off to around $5 million each. I've done this to you guys before where you have each block represents a finger. Sometimes they skipped a block, et cetera, because of what that report and that obligation said at that time. What our folks have been doing is getting as much more of these blocks filled in. And this is just the last 2 years of what they have added in. I think about Councilman Giruso's district, Louis the 14th is one of those numbers in his district. But when they add that block, they then have to go do the the archaeology, the historic preservation, and they have to look at where we're doing the $300 million in green infrastructure spending that we're using CDBG and FEMA hazard mitigation funds for to ensure we're coordinating it in the right way for drainage. So EHP doesn't stop. And then the last thing I appreciate you letting me say is bond money allows us to do this the most effectively. That's our most flexible source. Ideally, every one of these blocks gets paid for by the already obligated FEMA money, and our prices are just coming in lower. So we just keep using that money. But where we have a real problem, where we have to be flexible, the bond money that the voters approved in November and in previous years allows us to do that. Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation. I think this is helpful to everybody. Appreciate DPW being here. It gives a thorough explanation. Look forward to showing a little bit more work. Thank you, Ramsey and Keith and Randy, for your work and for being here. We appreciate it. All right. With that, closing out item number 4, we're going to go to number 3. What I'm going to do is 2 things. One, I'm going to start with public comment actually first, and then I have some remarks to make on billing, and then we'll open it up to my colleagues if they have anything they want to add to, we'll go from there. So the first two comments are actually from Michael Coburn, 900 3rd Street. Comment number one is, if Sewage and Water Board can't handle simply billing properly, as evidenced by the inability to grant hearings for improper billing and simply going with pay what you think you own system, why is the state government not stepping in, or is the governor on board with what's going on? Comment number two, I've read your high billing flow chart, and it is, all in caps, wildly different from what actually happens. When will the system outlined in the flow chart match reality? My high bill was never investigated. I was told 5 months ago a hearing would be granted. It was not, and I've been told to pay what I think I owe, but have been given no path toward resolution. I have all of this in writing, and I'm happy to submit that as well. And then the last comment that I have for now is from Susan Glennon at 38 Warbler, who says, I'm a widow with 2 successive water bills of $500 plus a month, proved that I have no leaks. Water Board said they are not at all at fault and won't give me a chance to argue my case. And that's much more succinct than what I'm getting ready to say and show. And look, there's been tremendous progress by the board on canal cleanings and increasing its power supply, which it absolutely deserves credit for, and we're going to spend time showing. But it's long past time for Sewage and Water Board to clean up its billing problems. We understand that Sewage and Water Board leadership inherited a billing system 4 years ago that it did not approve or implement. We also understand that it's not the job of the Sewage and Water Board to micromanage the solution to billing. And to be perfectly clear, no one should game the system by not paying what they actually owe to SWIFNO. 2 years ago, SWIFNO promised to make billing, 1, a priority, and 2, to improve it. The billing system has neither been prioritized nor improved in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, SWIFNO said it's fast tracking the hearing process. That has not been consistent. The comments just said as much. Worse, SWIFNO does not appear to follow its own policies. That contributes to unnecessary time and emotion spent addressing wildly inaccurate bills. 2 years ago, SWIFNO said it would have satellite offices in each council district and special sessions in the 9th Ward and Westminster. Today, SWIFNO is working on establishing a single site at the Sanitation Center. That leaves 4 other districts with no satellite office, nor for now the prospect of having it. 2 years ago, SWIFNO reconstituted an internal task force to monitor its billing system and address any potential errors that occur. 2 years later, there's no evidence of improvement. For example, ratepayers allegedly owe nearly $25 million more to SWIFNO than last year. 2 years ago, SWIFNO complaints from SWIFNO customers about their bills topped our issue list. Now that number in our office is skyrocketing. Paul, will you please pull up my presentation? This is from the bills that we discussed at our June meeting that we sent to Sewage and Water Board. And I just want to go over some of those right now to emphasize that point. Next slide, please. All right, what I want to focus on a little bit here is the billing policy versus what boots on the ground is showing. And that is that billing has been a 2-year priority, but that frequently its own billing policies are not followed. Next slide, please, Paul. All right, so let's start with one of the bills that we presented. This is a saga of a $30,000 bill. In January 2020, there was an actual read producing a bill of $178. In February, there's an unknown read, and I looked at the bill yesterday. It's completely blank in whether it's actual or estimated, and the bill was $198. So there's a variance of a little less than $20 when you look at the dollars and cents. Next slide. In March, that goes to nearly $30,000 bill, again, with a showing that it was an actual read. Not an estimate, but an actual read. The customer placed this bill under investigation. Next slide. Here's SWIFNO's publicly posted policies about everything that it will do. They're going to look at your account meter reads, Review the work order system for any repairs that may have been done in the area that could have affected the customer's billing. And that was what customers that we submitted part of our bills to Sewage and Water Board were told by Sewage and Water Board on Cromwell Place. Review the account history to confirm the consumptions at the normal high-low range for the past 12 months at that location. Then if the reading falls outside the range, a service order will be issued to examine the meter and to look inside. And then it may require more than that, a new meter, for example. And then the meter reader department will call, schedule an appointment, record their findings in the billing system. It also says that they will send you a letter indicating they've received your complaint and receive an update every 30 days until the complaint is resolved. Next slide. All right, so here we go with chapter 1, policy. We're going to get your letter, promises of 30-day updates, meter functioning properly, review work orders, all the things I just went through. What the ratepayer receives is a letter saying, we visited you in 2020 May, your meter is working accurately, and verified the $30,000 bill as correct. Chapter 2, next slide, please. All right, so the policy again is supposed to be inspector appointment, making sure that there's another letter. Ratepayer resubmits bill. There's an early report of a leaking water meter. Without explanation, the bill's adjusted $30,000 to now over $1,050. So we've gone from March to June with a $29,000 reduction, but still a bill that's 10 times higher than normal, roughly. Next slide. Now, chapter 3, after the investigation is allegedly complete, requires proof of repair by a licensed plumber, leak that's responsibility of Sewage and Water Board, 100% of excess sewer, excess water is removed. And if you have an unexplained one-time high bill, yearly adjustment of water consumption to match average water usage. Here, no letter received 30 days later. Finally, our office is notified and the bill still stands at over $1,050. Next. Then you can request an administrative hearing, and of course, the ratepayer is still awaiting for administrative hearing on this bill. Next slide. This is my staff going out to review the meter, and what they initially found is on the left. It's caked in mud and water, and obviously on the right is what it looks like once that's cleaned off. I'm told that Sewage and Water Board meter readers have a spray that makes it easier to read, even if it doesn't look here. But this is the condition of the meter just a month later as we sit here, at least as far as we're aware of their resolution. Next. We handpicked 10 problematic bills. We expected investigation, accounting, and explanation. The 45-day deadline, which is longer than Sewage and Water Board says it takes to address these problems, wasn't met. And frankly, for the bills, there hasn't been the requisite amount of action. You can leave the PowerPoint, please, Paul. There's simply no system of rational review. Opening your monthly water bill should not create anxiety, but for so many people, that's the reality. As I've repeatedly said, this creates a yawning gap in billing inequity. Those who have either the power to fight can, or simply, for those without, they're often stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't have the time or money to challenge a bad bill, but are told to pay up. Ratepayers should not be floating these operations. Sewage and Water Board has two options. First, it can get its house in order in the next quarter and publicly show a concerted and objective commitment to improvement. Or, it is my belief, based on the charter, its rate-making authority, and the silence of state law, this council is empowered by ordinance to pass billing changes and other measures to bring the billing problem to heel. Sewer and water rates have each increased 80% since 2012. Money should not be the problem. It appears that lack of urgency is. The public is not looking for lip service, but better customer service. We expect to see appreciable and actual billing progress by the next quarterly report. Before I turn it over to Sewage and Water Board colleagues, do you have anything to add?
Joe, yeah, I do want to ask, and the Sewage and Water Board has had problems for a very long time, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just acknowledging a fact. So when you say getting their house in order, I'm curious if we continually ignore that there has been progress, then we ignore what's been done right. And has anything been done right?
Well, that's why I started my comments by saying, and look, I'm going to spend time on the power, which I think has made tremendous progress, the canal cleanings, which have made progress, but billing, I have not seen the degree of progress, nor I think have the people of the city seen the degree of
And look,
progress.
I don't dispute that. I mean, my mama got a bill that screwed up, so I get it. But I don't know what the answer is that we can all of a sudden throw everything out and start brand new and make it all fixed immediately. I think we got to work towards that. And it's my appreciation that that is happening. Now, is it happening fast enough? No. And trust me, I'm not the defender of the Sewage and Water Board. But I know that Sewage and Water Board has two major issues, infrastructure and image. And if we keep making the image look very bad, then it's going to be real hard to get the support, to get the resources necessary to fix the infrastructure. And while I agree with you fully, this is taking way too long, but I don't know if it could take less time. So I'm curious as to when you say get their house in order, what specifically do you want them to do?
Well, I mean, let's start with promising in the first report in June and October that they would have satellite offices in every district. That is a simple thing that can be done. It hasn't been done. I mean, it just hasn't. One thing.
But there is one satellite out in New Orleans East, and out there is one. Now
that leaves the people in Central City without a place. These people.
I get it, but
maybe
the commitment shouldn't have been made, and maybe the commitment shouldn't have made to establish 5. I do know that resources are an issue. I know that space is an issue. And at some point, maybe we need to put our expectations into a realm that we can actually meet them. Now, should they have committed to putting 5 satellites? Maybe they shouldn't have. But you've got one with the intention to get the others. But if you can't do them all today, that means we ignore the fact that there has been some progress with the one.
I think if you're calling 1 and 2 years progress, we have different definitions of progress.
And you didn't have any. So at this point, you got 1. So you do have some.
Okay. So 20% of 100%.
Right. But that 20% is better than 0%. So we can.
I will concede that 20% is better than 0%.
Okay. So with that, again, I don't want to minimize the issues, and I don't want to take away anyone's concern that this process is not being addressed fast enough. But I also think that we need to be intentional on making sure that we have the public understand that there is an intention to get it done. Now, is it moving fast? It ain't moving fast enough for nobody. Again, man, if you Google Mama's Boy, you're going to see my picture. My mama got a big old stupid bill. All right. Now, I'm not an engineer, and maybe the way to do this, maybe we just ought to have just a flat bill and have everybody pay a flat fee until we can fix this billing system. Maybe that's a way to get this done. Everybody pay just whatever, and we figure out what the dollar amount is until we can actually get to the point that we stop sending people these big egregious bills. Maybe that's the way to do it. And I don't know if you'd be in support of that, but that's a thought that would help, I think, ease some of the frustration of the public if they knew that they were going to get a quote $100 bill every month. Then let them budget for that, and then we'll fix it on the backside.
Place to start is if you have a policy, follow your policy. And that doesn't require hard work, doesn't require money. It requires saying, if you're going to say you have a bill, and your mother is a perfect example, other people have bad bills. If you're supposed to get a letter every 30 days, then get the letter. And I think one of the problems you bring up, I think, is perfectly fair, and one that I agree with Sewage and Water Board about, in fairness to them, is I think a lot of people don't understand what's called the true-up process, which is the amount of money that somebody actually owes because their bills have been estimated. But if you don't get it explained to you, then you just say, you're right, the image is bad, the credibility is hurt, so I don't owe this money. And that's unfair, not only to the agency, but to everybody else who's then having to support them. How long does it take to say, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, your estimated bills were $100 for January, February, March. You really should have been paying $170. The difference then is $210. And so that is what you owe us. And we're going to work with you and explain it to you and show it to you on the front end. I don't think that requires an act of God or Congress. It just requires a little bit more diligence than what's going on.
Well, I want to argue that we can do a better job at explanations, and I don't want to argue that we need to do a better job at public relations. I just want to be clear that we need to be tempering this with the reality of the situation that we have to deal with. This thing was bad when we got it. It is better now. Now, is it as good as it's going to get? No. But it's a show a lot better than what it was. And that's the part that I think we lose in the wash when we are constantly pointing out all the negative and don't take any time to point out the positive. So
we're going to take time to point out the positives, because I agree with you that, you know, the JIR work deserved a lot of recognition. I think the power is incredible. And in fact, I asked Paul before the meeting to pull up the chart, because it is good to see not only what's being done, but you can see it objectively, and there's timelines for it being done. And it's important, and I hope if anybody's watching this, that they pay attention, because I think criticism is both sides of the coin. There's good and there's bad. And you're right. So the power, canal cleanings, other aspects of the report, are you pulling up the power part right now, Paul? Yeah, this is great. And I might even like move us down a little bit so people can see. And Ghassan, I realize I'm stealing some of your thunder here on what's going on with power, but for people who have not read the quarterly reports, this lays out in a very simple chart exquisitely what Sewage and Water Board has as a power source, what the timeline is for repairing it, what the plan is, what the cost is, which is incredibly important, right? I mean, we know there's lack of resources, and then what the funding source is. And so Turbine 5, which blew up, the plan is to use insurance proceeds and get that fixed in the next 6 to 8 months. That kind of comes online, and Ghassan, you know, again, I'm stealing from you a little bit, but you know, that's to improve the system as we head into hurricane season. Turbine 6, we've been talking, you're right, Councilmember Banks, about weatherizing this and winterizing it for forever. And now it looks like by February of 2021, so when it is cold, we'll actually be able to do that. The same thing, I'm gonna skip down on Turbine 7 to the frequency changer, the ability to be able to convert the 50 hertz to 25 hertz in 8 months. So again, before hurricane season starts next time. And then longer term, the next two are Turbine 7, which I know the mayor and the New Orleans delegation worked so hard for, and getting additional money and getting the CDBG funding right concurrent with towards the end of next year as Turbine 5 is back online. And then I know this last one has been something Councilmember Banks, Councilmember Moreno in particular, along with Energy and myself and Sewage and Water Board have been focused on, which is the substation site, which is really the redundancy on the power that I think everybody's looking for first and foremost, and then using the turbines, even number 2. This is a great story. It's a great story. And I feel like this is the level of detail that Sewage and Water Board is capable of and is doing. And I think it shows not only what the mayor has done on fair share to secure so much necessary funding for all of these things, but also the level of intention and thoughtfulness that's being brought about to power. And Ghassan, again, I'll do it for you. I mean, credit to you and Bob Turner and others working with them who have thought through this issue, who are looking at the money, and now we can look at the public and say, look, in the next several months, here are real power source changes that are upcoming. And Jay, I think this deserves the lauding as well, because it's something, you're right, we have been asking for before we came into office. These have been chronic problems, and here we are. To borrow one of your expressions, it took us a minute, but look, this is not just theoretical. This is actual progress, and I think the people of New Orleans deserve to know, and Sewage and Water Board deserves the credit for that.
And that's all I'm asking, Joe. We need to tell the whole story. And again, while it is far from being perfect, at least there is some progress. And I think that's what we're missing too often, ignoring the fact that positive steps are being made. Now, the billing is very, very, very frustrating, but I guarantee you this power is essential and critical and just as important, if not more important than the billing. And at the end of the day, I think we just need to have a balanced look and a balanced acknowledgement of the Sewage and Water Board's warts and its beauty at the same time. We just need to look at both sides when we talk about it, because if we're constantly talking about the negative, that's what the public perception is, that there's nothing good there. It's just a horrible, horrible place, and all the people are evil and bite the heads off of babies and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, I think we got to tell the story and tell it balanced so that we get the whole picture. And I think we'll be able to get to where we get with getting all of these issues addressed. I'm excited about this too. I think that this shows the intentionality of the board, the administration, this council in trying to fix these problems. None of these things came into place the day we got inaugurated. All of this stuff was in place long before we got there, but we're doing what we got to do to fix it. And that's what I don't want to get lost in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And look, I think both of us have the mindset that criticizing something completely doesn't help. But I think we also agree that as long as billing remains an issue, it feeds into the image problem. And really, that is the most front-facing thing that people have. And the sooner we get that fixed, the more people have confidence in the system across the board.
And I stand with you 100% in that assessment, 100%.
Right. Thank you. All right, Ghassan, good morning. We basically done the meeting for you, I think, now. So if you want to leave, we'll welcome that too. But you start with what you want to. I do also want to acknowledge, I didn't pull it up, but the canal cleanings portion of the report is significant too, and credit to Sewage and Water Board for that. But I do think I'm sort of, let's get the bad news out of the way first type of person, and then we can focus on the good stuff. And I do want to spend a significant time focusing on that power, and I want you to take a little bit of a victory lap on that. But I think we need to focus on billing first and moving from this as a priority to kind of showing concretely what it's going to look like over the next couple of months.
Certainly, and good morning, everyone. And I do want to start by thanking you for stealing my thunder. When somebody tells your story, especially if it's a good one, that's a good sign. That's a sign of partnership. And so I do thank you for that. And I did enjoy the honest dialogue between you and Councilman Banks. And it's a reflection of what's going on and the challenges that we're facing. There is a lot of good things happening, and then certainly a lot of challenges continue. But good partnerships also manifest itself in pushing us to do better. And that's what you're doing, and we do appreciate what you do. When you say we expect better results or more improvements by the next quarterly report, I couldn't agree more. And I'm here to tell you that you should expect it, and I'm very confident we will deliver on improvements. And if you want to call this maybe possibly or think that this may be lip service, I would just point your attention to the fact that at the end of 2019, where we had made billing a priority for us, we had really made a lot of improvements specifically in the number of reads that we wanted to accomplish. And we got to a very high number. And at the beginning of 2020, where we're maintaining that momentum. And then I'm the last one who wants to continue to blame COVID, but COVID did happen and really threw our world upside down, just like everybody else. And we struggled, and we found ourselves unequipped to manage customer service relations because we couldn't work remotely. We had a lot of hits with positive cases within our staffing, and we just basically came apart. And recognizing that, we have made a strong effort into improving the number of reads that we have to do every month. And we are seeing results as we speak. We are up to 55% from as low as 30. And just this past week, stats are showing us to be showing maybe 5 to 10% improvement just within 1 week's work, because we are ramping up our own staffing. We're doing a lot of training, but as you know, we also brought on Olameter, who is a private meter reading, which is augmenting our staff, and for the sole purpose of getting us to the 80 and 90% of reads. The sole purpose of that is so we do not have to estimate, because we know the estimates create a lot of angst, inaccuracies, and whatever word you want to come up with. We just agree wholeheartedly that estimates are the wrong way to do business. So we are confident, barring no other emergencies or challenges, we are on our way to get back to the 80, 85, maybe even higher. And I'm going on on a limb here and committing to that by the next quarter report, even with a steady progress reporting to you, showing how many reads we're accomplishing. Relative to promises we've made, the last several months, we've had struggles even maintaining our own staffing here at St. Joe's and in the East Bank and Algiers. So that's why the focus on venturing out and do satellites really was very challenging and difficult to deliver. I don't believe we committed to 5 of them in any immediate sense, but we know we started with 1, and certainly I'm not challenging your perception for certain. And if we are to be to deliver 5 at one point, so be it. But I think opening 1 at the lower 9th is a great start. It shows partnership with a community partner, with obviously the Councilwoman Wen, who really brought to us a viable location. And that satellite hopefully not only will produce customer service agents and opportunity for an accessibility, but we're also considering holding hearings at that satellite. And hopefully that would be a proven effective model that we can mimic elsewhere. So it's 20.
Hassan, can I ask you this? I'm sorry to interrupt, but sort of to that point, like, I think we all understand there's only so many people who can do this, or the equipment or whatever. Does it make sense even to have like a roving satellite dates at certain points? So District A, you're going to get Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of week 1. District B gets then Thursday, Friday, Monday. So that way it gets on a schedule. And again, I'm not trying to necessarily hold to the fact that there has to be a dedicated site in each of the districts, but at least if there's a regular roving site in each of the districts, I think that it creates 2 things. It creates the ability for people to go, and it creates goodwill for people to be able to be, and probably an outlet as well for people.
We're considering 2 possibilities in that regard. One is we are investing in a very inexpensive van that will allow us to do that roving and have accessibility everywhere, but also one team that actually can rove from one satellite location to another satellite location. So you have one that maybe have 3 or 4 days worth of roving again, maximizing or optimizing accessibility. So that's what we're working on as we speak. But again, focusing on just having the one to create a template that allow us to find another location, hopefully with partnership from you and others, to find a library, find some space that that would not require more than just some IT installation and no other costs associated with that, and that team becomes very proficient in dealing with
And
our
geography may work to your advantage too, right? Like there's on the map, Councilmember Banks and I share a significant portion of Mid-City. So A and B may be able to be in one place. And
Right.
thinking of, maybe Treme for Councilmember Palmer and Brissett. I don't want to speak for them, but just sort of identifying, sort of even centrally within two council districts, there might be a place to kind of make it a multi-district location. So that way you're further increasing efficiencies and not spreading yourself too thin.
So if I may make an ask, this one center, San Jose Center, really was prompted by partnership from a community partner, and again, the councilwoman. So if you are aware of a location that you think would be workable, we are more than happy to consider it. Again, once we have that one team established that can rove, then it becomes a much easier task to execute. So we're very open. I know we've utilized libraries before. That obviously has proven now challenging because they're not accessible. They don't want folks there at this point. I don't know if they're even open. So if there are any other locations that you are aware of or other council members are aware of, we're happy to work with you to find those locations and again, expand accessibility.
Councilmember Banks.
Yeah, Ghassan, by the next meeting, can you give us a schedule that includes just that? Can you commit to giving us a schedule that will include a roving satellite throughout the city by the next meeting? Can you commit to that?
I can commit to letting you know how that van that we're investing in, equipping it, how it can rove and be accessible. And I can commit to working with you and continue to look to find the locations just like we found one. I mean, I don't want to.
I'm comfortable in believing, and I will never speak on behalf of my colleagues without their approval, but I'm comfortable in believing that all of us who have districts will be happy to find a spot that will accommodate you. So with that, I don't think we're going to have very much difficulty in getting locations throughout the city. And I think Joe is point on that where we are contiguous, we could very well have a spot, on Canal Street that's got me on one side, him on the other side, or somewhere. And I think that all of the districts would be amenable to that. So that part is not going to be the issue. The issue is getting the logistics in place and the commitment from you all to be able to do it. So the locations, I'm comfortable we can find space. And I'm not visualizing, and forgive me if I'm not seeing this the way it is, but I don't think you need the Superdome to be able to do this. You just need enough room for people to be able to get in and to be able to sit or at a kiosk or to be able to just enough electronics to be able to transmit whatever they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So can you come back with that? If we commit to getting you with a plan that commits to that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Councilmember Banks, you're making a really good point. I think one of the things that would be helpful for the next meeting, Ghassan, is here are 5-7 things that this is what it looks like, right? So here is the satellite office plan. Here is, I know you have it in this report, but the solid commitment to the billing cycle being between 28 and 32 days, because that's screwing people up when either they get the 18-day bill or the 45-day bill in between. I think the issue with explaining true-ups requires attention, or the letters being, if you're going to have a 30-day policy to update people and they're doing it, then either go to 30 days or go to 60 days, something so people know what it is. But I think Councilmember Banks, you're making an excellent point, which is people don't know about the progress unless you're telling them, and then making sure that it's reasonable and feasible, I think, is important too.
I agree.
All right, go ahead, Ghassan. I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to, I don't have a presentation, as you could want to kind of reiterate, repeat a couple of the billing related improvements. Again, you know, the focus on the ramping up of the staffing. I don't want that lost on, and again, that's what gives me the confidence that we're going to deliver better result to you. I do want to point out the fact that we had corrected the billing cycle. That may have created some issues by doing so, but now we're at a point where the cycle is within 30 days, give or take 2 days. So it's 28 to 32. Hopefully that will take away a lot of the ups and downs and the variation that you may see should you have an accurate read. And so we're minimizing that variation for you. I will also want to share with you that, again, to improve the quality of the work that we're doing in the meter reading arena, working with civil service, we had created just finished, and it's being implemented, an incentive program to incentivize higher quality work, whether it's punctuality, whether accuracy of reads, the number of reads, minimum missed reads, things like that, that just at the end of the day will raise the standard for all meter readers and across all of them. So we are producing better product for our customers. So we think that's gonna pay dividend. It's not gonna cost us a lot of money, but it's raising morale, and it's, again, at the end of the day, it's gonna make our customer service better, minimizing the angst and the need for hearings and disputes and what have you. We're also looked very closely at the way we estimate, even though our goal is to minimize the need for that. We had relied on the past 4 months of reads to come up with a customized estimate for a customer. Because of the lack of reads and the increased number of estimates during the major part of this year, we lost that database, basically, or that data. So now we've adjusted our estimates and the format, and now we're going back 10 months and we've experimented with 8 and 12, but we've landed on 10 being a very accurate way to estimate your usage. So that's a very recent improvement, and again, it hopefully will result in closer estimates, and obviously at the end of the day, a minimal true up when the true up happens. So just wanted to kind of share those improvements, again, to show that we are committed to make our customers whole and produce better results, and that it is a front and center, and it's a top priority, and we're committed to make improvements in that arena.
And I appreciate that we're hearing so much about the estimates and the front end part of it, but I guess the other piece, Ghassan, that I think needs to be focused on too is that back end. Once somebody either gets a legitimately bad bill or a bad bill that they just don't understand, that is taken care of in a different way. Is there, like, I know there was in a task force, or you were talking about at the end of 2019 that there have been improvement. I guess is a very long way of asking this question. There's no customer service person per se yet. So, like, A, who's owning this back end, and then B, what is being done not only to improve what people are getting initially, but then now that we have so many people who are in a position where they're challenging or being paying what they feel like they owe or whatever, to really examine those bills.
Right. So you alluded to the fact that we had a somewhat of a setback, having found what we thought was the right person to lead our customer service office, and they backed out. And then we've obviously restarted that effort, and we're very close to hopefully gaining another one with a talent that will hopefully elevate our customer service unit to a higher level. Currently, the ownership of customer service is it's a collective effort. I'm very involved. I have a lot of people work by my side, but we know that we have to really dissect that process a little bit and make it more friendly at minimum, and more consistent with our policy, follow the policy. We're changing some of the wording just to make it clear. And you're right, we have to deliver on what we say we owe the customer at minimum. So all this to say that that's an area that is requiring some work, and we're focusing on it. There's just a lot of open fronts, to say the least, and that is something that we're going to focus on. We just had a conversation about that this morning, and it starts by hearing some taped calls from our customer agents with customers, emphasize training to all, and things of that nature. So I hope to be able to deliver better news and maybe better product and more revised process to you next time we meet.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I guess other piece of this is, I know we're asking for the next quarterly report for this to be rolled out publicly, but I think all of us are saying in this partnership, we're willing to talk on a regular basis. I know you have a lot of things to do and don't want to piddle with elected officials every single day, nor do I blame you for that. But, if it's every 2 or 3 weeks or once a month that we can do it, because my suspicion is the interests overlap more than not, and that what people are really looking for, I think more than anything else, is certainty and predictability. And I know as an engineer, that's what you want to be able to provide to people. And again, I feel like we're seeing some differences now being implemented on this front end, moving away from estimates, trying to get more actual reads, hiring Olameter. You didn't mention, but your report says that you've hired more analysts to catch bad bills before they're being sent out. I think there's 2 of those. So all of that, to Councilmember Banks's point, deserves attention and credit. But I think the problem that I think I would like to see more attention paid to and more concrete objectives is either stricter adherence to the policy, or if the policies need to be tweaked, what's being done for people who, like the comments, they've gotten the bad bills and they feel like they're stuck. How do we get those people unstuck?
Right. And I know in the past we've engaged your office in ways to improve our process, and I would repeat that ask if you're willing to allow some of your staff to be part of the process and its improvement, and because you're so close to it, you can see it maybe a little closer from the customer perspective. I think that would be an added value, whether it's your office or other council members' office. Just kind of give us that perspective, tell us what may be seen as too adversarial or too tone deaf to the needs of our customer. We're very happy to maybe incorporate your perspective in how we improve that process.
And I don't want to belabor this. First of all, we're happy to do that. Okay, happy. But just by way of sort of concrete example from my perspective, and I mentioned this to you before, we have somebody who's out of town. They got a negative energy bill of $277, but their sewage and water bill was $300. And I understand Sewage and Water Board says, well, they have a pool or whatever, but it's really hard to explain that there's a $600 swing from one to the other. And there may be a rationale, but I can't give it to them. And so I'm happy, particularly for people on my staff who are closest to this and who deal with the constituents on a regular basis. And then also, Ghassan, to work on, a way to systematize it to make it better for everybody too, right? Like, this person is in a true up bucket. This is why you belong there. This person, the policy allows 1 month to be waived or the fees waived, so we're going to enter them. And that this person, there's just no way, even though the meter says this, the gallon usage can't possibly match 2 people who don't have a pool, or it doesn't sound feasible. So I just think that back end needs some of the same attention that the front end is getting. Okay. Do you want us? I mean, I'm happy to focus on the other things, but I do think the power deserves some attention. Do you want Paul to pull back up that
Absolutely.
table?
Happy to talk about.
Because I think that deserves a lot of time. I know Bob's on the call as well, but I think that's something that particularly as we're hopefully beginning to exit hurricane season, that people start seeing in black and white.
Sure. And thank you for that slide. I think the biggest really point that I want to focus on, and there are obviously many moving parts. This is a very collective, comprehensive look at power and what it needs to look like, and it's predicated really on putting a master plan together that was developed last several months, that was unveiled earlier this year, that really is setting the tone and describing the path, and everything we're doing is fitting that vision. But the T5 decision, which may take, I think it is a very logical decision that we made, and I do want to publicly acknowledge Bob Turner and his staff, his engineers who pushed hard to give T5 a consideration, because if you recall, at one point I kind of dismissed it as, I don't want to repair an old piece of equipment. I want to invest in a new one, which we are in T7. But the fact of the matter is, we have insurance company that is going to help with some of the costs of bringing it back to life. The fact that the damage was minimal on the inside after GE did its comprehensive assessment, and the fact that we can deliver it in a much timelier fashion, meaning for the next year's hurricane season, where T7 couldn't be delivered within that shorter time frame, that all led to the logical conclusion of reinvesting in T5, bringing it to life. And ultimately, depending on how confident we are in how it's operating, we're going to add obviously a lot of safeguards to it to avoid any mishaps from happening again. But it could allow us the luxury or the consideration to maybe decommission one or two of the other steam turbines that currently T3 is available for emergency use only. If T5 is functioning and operating successfully and efficiently, that gives us to take one or two, T1 or T3 offline completely and do away with steam turbines. So there's a lot of good things associated with that decision. I do want to give the credit to Bob and his team for pushing hard on that.
And Ghassan, can we get in the weeds here for a second? Because I do ordinarily feel like talking about things at a high level makes a lot of sense, but I think this one deserves maybe even digging a little bit deeper. When turbine 5 comes back online, and maybe this is a Bob question, are we expecting that it will be able to give that 15 to 20 megawatts of additional power, you know, for the next 5 to 10 years? Because if that's and then the second part of that, that's the case, then it will take Sewage and Water Board's available power minus the EMDs from a little over 53, 54 megawatts to 72, 73, right?
Yeah, once it's reconditioned and refurbished and put back in service, it hasn't lost any of its wattage or output, so it will maintain that. 15 would be on the low end, and we're confident that it will deliver that. So yes, it will become actually more of a go-to turbine versus other ones like the EMDs or T1 or T3.
And can you, and I know I've went through this, but can you talk about what the importance of what the frequency changer means? I know you know it does, but I think for people to understand what that means for 6 to be able to convert the power, the significance of that for, I think primarily what you're talking about is maybe to give T1 and T3 a little bit of rest, or to supercharge T6 in a way.
Right, so the frequency changer is basically, in layman's terms, an adapter. It reduces the 60 hertz power to 25 hertz to drive the 25 hertz pumps that we have. and it certainly will allow the use or utilization of T6, which is available. It's a newer, very efficient turbine to be utilized in case, for example, an outage or if a loss of power from Entergy. Now we are able to redundantly use T6 in lieu of Entergy. But in addition to that, it allows us to mimic or parallel that usage of T6 at one point when we have a frequency changer. More importantly is when we have T7 online in 18 months or so, the ability, so that would be a 60 hertz power or generator that can only be useful to drive or power the pumps, the 25 hertz pumps, is through that frequency changer. So that's going to be a very crucial piece of equipment in order to allow us to optimize T6 and T7 and ultimately more than that at one point.
Thanks, Ghassan. I actually just stepped away for a moment because we have a constituent who had an administrative hearing, and I wanted to hear how it went. And I think to Council Member Banks's point that criticism deserves the good and the warts, that it went smoothly, that the issue was resolved, and that it was taken care of. So I want to report that in real time too, because I think balance is important, and the fact that when something goes right, it deserves to be recognized too.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right. So Ghassan, let me maybe bottom line this a little bit. So turbine 5 comes online. We're in September. Let's say by next April. Turbine 6 is weatherized. The frequency changer is there around the same time. We're looking at about another 20 megawatts worth of power. And then assuming we get turbine 7 online in roughly, let's say, September or October, November of 2021, if my math is right, will that be closer to about 90 megawatts of power, so almost double what Sewage and Water Board needs to run its system?
I mean, the number looks right, but it's very key to know, just so we're transparent and we're clear that the 90 will never all be available at the same time,
right,
but will create the redundancy that it's so crucial to have, and that's the key and the crucial part of having the multiple sources of power. In case one goes down, another one can be stood up and substitute for that loss.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, and also I know from a technical standpoint, the SAN one, the less that Sewage and Water Board has to rely on the EMDs would be good too. Do you want to spend a minute talking about? And I realize this is further down the road. I feel like we've gone through a good exercise here of sort of short term, knowing that T5 is going to come back online, that the frequency changer is coming, 6 is going to get weatherized, more midterm T7, but long term about the substation, what that potentially looks like, and sort of generically where we stand right now.
So generally speaking, the conversations and you can call them ultimately negotiation with our partner Entergy continue successfully. There's a lot of moving parts associated with the installation of a substation. Obviously, one key component is the awaiting a site for that substation to be built on. And as you can see on that chart, that C7, C8 site is proceeding. Thankful for the state dollars allowing us to proceed. So that's the first really critical path item that on that we're going to call it 5-year plan. So at the same time, we're obviously developing a plan for the substation, ultimately negotiating rates, coming to you for approval, or Entergy would be coming to you for approving that investment that they're going to make. And then the substation is designed and it's constructed on that site, and it would be, again, generally speaking, designed solely to support and becoming the primary source of power for the sewage and water board pumping or drainage needs. Obviously, that's where the frequency changer that is coming online will be crucial to allowing that utilization, but also another one that would be part of the package of the substation to make the substation useful for, again, the 25 hertz pumps until such time, well beyond the 5 years, where those pumps are, I guess, regutted or replaced and made 60 hertz, where then the frequency changers become less needed, and then you have a direct line between the substation and those pumps. Now, one thing cannot be lost, because people may wonder why we're investing in turbines. Any utility, especially when you're dealing with producing or pumping drinking water or pumping drainage water out of our city, it's crucial and it's very important to have a redundant system. And the redundant system that has two reliable components. So the substation will certainly bring reliability and a hardened system because of the way it's going to be built, attached to a transmission line that's weatherized against 100 miles per hour winds and such. And then we'll be bringing on a newer technology, turbines T6, T7, hopefully T8, to stand up in case something happens on the substation part. So that's an obligation that our utility will always have, to have a redundant system available and reliable. So that's basically the big picture. We believe that it's a 5-year plan. And I think that's being fairly conservative. I think the funding obviously is going to be a challenge, but it's realistic in terms of what we're forecasting to be where we would go to fund the project. We're going to need your help. Obviously, Entergy stepping up and fronting the infrastructure cost is crucial. There need to be a payback plan that has to be put in place to satisfy their investment, but at the same time allowing us to enjoy the comfort and the luxury of a reliable source, being the substation. So a lot of moving parts. Obviously, you will be a crucial part of that process in terms of guiding it and ultimately approving it.
Yeah, I think, Ghassan, I appreciate the fact that you spend a minute explaining that, because I think you're smart to look at the idea of redundancy here, that we don't want to put all of our eggs in a single basket. And even with a brand new, shiny potential substation, there's still potential for something to go wrong there. And with the idea of 7 and 6, which are both new, or and the other ones as backup power, I think that bears noting and being repeated, and also I think shows good strategic work as well.
Thank you.
All right. I think we've exhausted about anything on power. Was there anything else, Ghassan, that you wanted to focus on while you had this opportunity? I mentioned the canal cleanings, and I guess if I may be so bold as to give a PSA, please don't throw your couches into the canals. I saw that you said the Morrison Canal had a full-size sofa in there, so now we're 1 for 1 on the car and 1 for 1 on the couches. It's really hurting the people of New Orleans for people to throw those large of items. You're literally creating a plug in the hole by doing that, and it's already enough when sediment and dirt and trees and leaves, sort of the things that naturally will get in there, will be there, but people throwing not only small, but particularly these very large objects make sewage and water board's job that much harder. is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I do think the fact that there's been more dedication of resources to canals as sort of that middle part of the system, right? Sort of the catch basins and the lines first and the canals right before you get to the pumps merits some discussion potentially.
No, very well said, Mr. Chair, and we will not lose sight of how important that component is, and we will remain vigilant on, inspecting and maintaining the best we can, and kind of worth repeating that the public needs to do their part and be responsible. We're not asking them to clean our canals, but don't throw objects in our canals. So we do our part, and we ask them that they do theirs.
Councilmember Palmer, I saw you came over.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. There's been a noticeable improvement in the canals in Algiers, and I do appreciate that. I do have a question regarding the lateral pipes that go into the canals. How often are those inspected?
I do not know the answer to that question. I don't know if Bob is online. I don't know how that we inspect them regularly. So Bob, if you're comfortable, chime in. Otherwise, we're happy to respond in a follow-up email with it.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So if you recall, I think it was last year that we developed a 5-year plan for cleaning the underground canals, and that included a lot of the large diameter pipes, which would be 36 inches in diameter and larger. And although we've had some issues this year, particularly associated with the pandemic and of course the resulting financial situation we find ourselves in, we're not going to make the goal that we set for ourselves for this particular year. But generally speaking, during the course of any one year, we will be inspecting both above ground canals, the large below ground canals that are typically rectangular in shape, as well as the culverts that you're talking about, the 36-inch and larger diameter culverts that we have to take care of. All of that is part of that 5-year inspection program.
Thank you. All right, Hassan, I appreciate your time. I know you had a full team on here in case people had specific questions, and appreciate the fact they're available and willing to answer questions. I'll make one last call to my colleagues, and then one of the things we'll do is, I know we have a lot of work already done on our bills that we had sent, so I'm happy to the extent we haven't shared that to make sure that we're getting that, and to try and be a thought partner in not only the front side, but also the back side, where I think some of that is happening, and how we can help with that. So council members, anything else? Seeing none, all right. With that, I will, and Ghassan, also in closing, I do think, I want to say, I think the council member Banks' point, like balance is key here, and that, good sort of like analysis after a football game, like LSU played really badly on defense and gave up 623 points, 623 yards on defense, but they're implementing a new system, and there were some bright spots. I think the bright spots have to be noted as well. So Councilmember Banks, thanks for saying that, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. You're right about that. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Councilmember Banks, seconded by Councilmember Palmer. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's 4 ayes. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.